is the Happy Scientist Podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happy scientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Scientist podcast from Bitesize Bio. If you want to become a happier, healthier and more productive scientist, you are in the right place. I'm Nick Oswald, the founder of bitesizebio.com, and with me is the driving force of this podcast, Mr. Kenneth Vogt, my friend, mentor and founder of the coaching company Vera Claritas. Today's episode is called What You Don't Know, You Don't Know. What is that all about, Ken?
Well, it's a little bit of a brain twister at the beginning, but once we describe this, I think it'll become clear to everyone. And then the real mystery will be, how do you figure out what you don't know? Because that's where all of the learning is, and that's where all the creativity comes from, and all the imagination. So it's a really vital area, because you could think, oh, well, that's just impossible, so why bother? As bioscientists, you are dealing in the impossible on a daily basis. So you better get good at this. So we're going to help you today. So we'll start off with the most obvious thing is what you know. You know what you know. You've worked hard, in fact, to gain the knowledge that you have. And especially for many of you with your advanced degrees, you put a lot of effort into knowing stuff. So these are things that you're aware of and that you understand, because there is the dichotomy of knowledge. There are things you might know, but you don't really get them. But in your case, it's really important that you understand, and you're constantly pushing the envelope on that. There are limits to our current understanding of many things. And so you are really striving to understand things that have been uncovered and have been discovered, and that's great. And you could make a whole career out of just that. Never go beyond that, and there'd be nothing wrong with it. It'd be fine. You'd be useful. You would enjoy yourself, but it is quite a bit more limited than it is possible for you. So the next area of knowledge is the things you know you don't know. So there are things you're aware of, but you're certain you don't understand them. And in a more mundane sense, you might be like, look, I'm certain I know how to drive a car, but I am certain that I do not know how to fly a 787. So knowing what you don't know can be quite useful. It'll keep you from getting into trouble. It'll keep you from doing things that are dangerous or that you just couldn't succeed at. And there's nothing wrong with that. It has not impacted my life one iota that I can't fly a commercial airliner. But I've known all my life I couldn't do it, and it's fine. And it does open up the possibility that now that I know I don't know it, well, I could choose to know it. I could go out and learn that, and I could gain that skill. And it doesn't have to be something that extreme, obviously. It could be little things. And if you think about all the skills you've developed over time, they're all things that you learned how to do. And it may have started off where you learned how to walk and you learned how to talk, but after a while you learned how to use certain equipment in the laboratory, and things that an average person might not know how to do. And some of them might have been simple, but some of them weren't. And Nick and I spend a lot of time with some folks that are expert microscopists, and to my mind, as somebody who was outside of the scientific field, I thought, well, every scientist uses a microscope; they must all be experts at it. Oh, boy, did I find out! No, not so. It's quite a thing to be a true microscopy expert. Well, for most of you who are scientists, you're not that. And so, what do you do in a situation like that? Well, you go to experts when you need assistance with that. When you need to really push the envelope on the equipment you're using or the methods that you're putting into practice, you go to experts to get help. So this leaves the final area of knowledge, what you don't know, you don't know. And I can't give you an example for that, because the moment I give you an example, well, then it's something you don't know. And so you got to look at that and think, boy, that's tough. But we all know that there are things that we're not aware of. And sometimes we know that we're not aware of things, but often we don't know. And
So I've got an example, Ken.
Oh, go ahead.
An example from the history of biology, which I think is an example of what you're talking about here. Back in the mists of time, last century, when I was an undergrad, we were taught that on the genome there were genes, and then everything in between the genes was junk DNA. It was dismissed as junk DNA. And there was no question of, it struck me at that point, there was no question of, that being, or the attitude was that there was no question of that actually being anything other than junk. But actually, since then, we've discovered that there's a whole range of functions that we didn't know about, that are many of which are very important for understanding of biology, but also for disease treatment and things like that. So at that time, we didn't know that stuff was important, and in a way, it comes back to that one thing that we talk about quite a lot is humility, about realizing that just because you don't know what something is, it doesn't mean that it's nothing. If you see what I mean, you must be open to the fact that it could be something other than what you think it is with the information that you have at hand now.
Right. And what you don't know kind of breaks down into two categories, and that's kind of the first one. That's something you understand, but you're not aware of. In other words, you knew there were genes, there were things in between those genes. You knew something was there, but you assumed that they didn't have any value. Well, it can't be that way. We've come to learn. I mean, I'm speaking as a neophyte here, but I've heard stories about this. But it began with you at least you saw something. But there's other stuff you just plain didn't see. And you gotta remember, there was a time not that long ago when we didn't even know there were genes. Any genes. And by the way, every one of us who's on this listening to this podcast, every one of you, there was a time when you didn't know about genes. You had to learn that. Somebody had to open your eyes to that as a concept even. And at the beginning, maybe they told you about it and you only had the most fuzzy understanding of what that means, and kind of like my present understanding of it. I have a vague idea what a gene is all about, but not to the extent that any of you do, because you've dug in that much deeper. And so that's part of what happens here. You have to take a look at knowledge and see where you stand in relation to it. So I want to give you a kind of a landscape for knowledge, just a way to think about this. So I'm gonna break it into four groups: what I'll call the known knowns, the unknown knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. So to think about them more clearly, the known knowns that's just knowledge. That's just the stuff that we would typically think of as knowledge, and more personally, we can think about our knowledge. Now, there may be things that we're aware are known in the world, but we don't know about. And that might be part of what's in the unknown unknowns. So in the case of unknown unknowns, the impact is unknown, but the existence is known. So think of it as untapped knowledge. And maybe it's knowledge you haven't yet accessed. You know it's there, though, and maybe it's in that paper you should be reading, or it's in a conversation with a more experienced colleague, but there's an unknown known out there. Well, then about these things that, like what you're talking about, Nick, there a moment ago, known unknowns, these are the areas of risks. If we just stuck with that assumption that, that's just junk DNA, how much would have been lost? How much have we grown since we wouldn't accept that notion? Oh, this is just junk, and more study was put in, and more effort was made. And then finally, these unknown unknowns, these are the unfathomable uncertainties. That's where all the juice is. This is where discovery comes from. This is where creativity comes from. It's not much of a discovery for you to go to a textbook and learn something you didn't know before. It was right there in the book, and it's not even that much of a discovery to, I don't want to take away from the discovery of things like what this supposed junk DNA is all about, because, that's still meaningful. But first discovering that there was this thing that they labeled junk DNA, that was a huge step forward. And it's a huge first step. You think, well, if that's a step forward, all we did is get to a place where we don't know anything. Yes, but it is critical to know what you don't know. That is where all the opportunity lies. So I'm gonna pause there for a second and let that sink in there, Nick, and see if you have anything more to say about it.
Well, I think that the only thing I'd say the main thing that I would say is that to check the show notes if that is confusing, because we have it, that landscape of knowledge mapped out in the show notes, the known knowns, unknown knowns, known unknowns, and unknown knowns. So
unknown unknowns.
Unknown unknowns, yeah. So if we're looking at discovery, this being, I guess that the main take home from this is to be aware that the kind of the world can be divided into those four sections, really, or all of the possible knowledge can be divided into those four sections, and just to be aware of that. I guess that would be the first step, because then that gives you the humility to say, okay, to be aware that there are things that you don't know, and you don't know, which is the first step on the path to investigating them and uncovering what is actually going on there.
Yeah, I've noticed, Nick, that in quite a few episodes, you've explicitly referenced humility, and it's becoming kind of a theme for the podcast because, man, it's such a critical component to being a successful and happy scientist. You're just not going to get anywhere if you think you know everything.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that in a way, the less you can assume, the easier your life is, in a way, because the more open you are, and the less you'll path yourself.
Yep. The less you assume, the more you will see.
Well, that's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, because we've all done that, where because we think something is a certain way, that's all we see, and whether that's literally about sight or about experiences, that we're having with other people, or it is so easy to cut yourself off from things that you're actually getting input from, but you're blocking the input. You won't hear it. You won't see it. You won't feel it. And it all comes down to you setting up preconceived notions about how things are. So, to know what you know is pretty easy. You know what you know. There isn't even a barrier there. And to know what you don't know, that's also pretty easy. You're very clear on that. And so the question is, how do you see something when you don't even know it's there? Because here we are telling you about how important it is to grasp what you don't know, and you're going, yeah, great, you just told me I can't know it. So how am I supposed to know about what I don't know? In that setting. So there's a way to do this. So I'm going to give you the tools so that you can become aware of what you don't know. And I'm going to start off by telling a tale about myself. One I'm not proud of. And like many of you I was a precocious little child, and I was good in school, and I really liked math. And I was good at it. And I couldn't understand why the kids complained about math, about how they hated it and how it was so hard. Because to me, it was so obvious and it was so orderly and beautiful, and I just thought that was fantastic. And then I got placed into an advanced math class, I was placed in algebra a year earlier than it would have been typical in my school system. And I'm so excited. This is going to be awesome, and I'm going to be great at this. And the teacher starts off, and she starts talking about formulas with letters on them, not just numbers. And I didn't get it. She gave that first lecture. At the end of that class, I was like a deer in the headlights. I did not understand what this X was. X equals 2. How can X equal 2? It's in the alphabet. I just couldn't get it. And so here it was, this thing that I didn't know. I'd never even heard this concept before. And I walked out of that class scared that, oh no, this is the moment where my identity is this smart kid who gets math was all over. And I was in the class, with other advanced kids, and they were getting it, at least so it appeared to me. And I thought, I'm doomed. But I don't know what happened. I went home that night, scared. I went to sleep, and I woke up, and I understood it. I woke up, and I got it. And part of it was I had this compelling need to get it. It really mattered to me. So that's one of the things that it starts off being. You need to be committed to being able to see the things you don't know, that you don't know. You got to make a conscious choice that way. Now, in my case, the conscious choice was made from a fairly weak position. I was afraid to not get it. But I could have come from a much more powerful position of being excited to learn and where I was going to reach out for it. But, get there whatever way you got to, right? If you're being motivated by moving away from something, I don't want to be the guy that doesn't understand this. Okay, use that. Better yet, though, if you could be excited about, I want to be the person that gets it. I want to be a discoverer. I want to be an explorer. I want to learn things that nobody's even thought to learn before. And you have so many great examples in bioscience for this. You've had so many go before you. You've got great possibilities for heroes and mentors. When I say heroes, I mean, there might be some of the people that have made great discoveries, Louis Pasteur and, that ilk. But, you can have mentors that are right in your lab right now. They could be professors you've had in the past. They can be fellow students that you came up with that just, really have the spark. So make use of those people to help you. And so, to do that, you got to commit to the idea that I am going to explore what I don't know. So the next point I want to make is beyond commitment is you got to trust. Trust that you're headed in the direction of new knowledge. Give yourself that opportunity. You don't have to even see any signs of it, because that's kind of the point. How many times have you learned something where it just it came to you in a flash, or you had an intuition or a hunch? These are not uncommon experiences. And yeah, are they wholly rational? No, they're not. Well, guess what? We're not wholly rational. Now, I'm not advocating irrationality here, but I am pointing out that rationality is limited. It only takes you so far. So don't be afraid to go beyond rationality. Go a little further and trust that there's going to be something there to find. Now, I'm not saying that every time that you look under a rock, you're going to see something. That's not true. But one thing that is going to happen is you keep looking under rocks, you're going to see things. So trust that there are things out there to learn, and there are things out there that you will find. It's not just that it's possible that they're out there. you're gonna run across them if you continue to make the effort. Now, to power that trust is to have curiosity. To have that curiosity is going to give you the energy to keep experiencing things that are out there, and keep trying new things. And again, we can go all the way back to childhood. We've been doing this our whole lives. You wouldn't know how to do anything if you hadn't been curious about something. And I suspect that for the kind of folks that end up as PhD bioscientists, curiosity's probably been a regular part of your life up until now. There are whole groups of other people that I would say, you can't guarantee that curiosity is going to be much of a factor there. But I think with this crowd, yes, curiosity is pretty naturally there. So tap into that and expand on it. You already know how to do it, so be really good at it. And if you don't think you're really good at it, get better at it. And it's a matter of practice. Put in your time, and you'll be more curious. And just always be looking for one more thing. What else could I learn here? What else could I know here? What else is possible? And then finally, another thing to consider is the idea of freedom. And that is that you're free to see things. You're free to learn things and experience new things. You are free to experience something new and unexpected. I realize that it can be useful for things to be orderly, and in some cases it's practically necessary. And in some cases, for what you're doing, it's a matter of safety that things be reliable. But you know what? New and unexpected happens. Sometimes your entire experiment just dies. And wow, that's horrible, right? Except there may be something really important to learn there. And that gives you the opportunity then to see something you didn't know. And I can't undervalue freedom. Be free in what you're doing, because you're the ones on the cutting edge. For me sitting here behind my computer, I can't even see where you are. You talk about what I don't know what I don't know about what you guys are doing on a regular daily basis. And it's fantastic that you're doing it. Otherwise, I'd have to do it. And I just don't have time. I'm doing other things. But, the same thing is happening here. The things that we're talking about in this podcast, you probably haven't, in many cases, put a lot of thought into some of these things. Well, that's why we have this podcast, to introduce these things to you, to let you know about some things you don't know, because you may never considered them before. And for good reason. You've been busy with other things. So this is my admission. So any further thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, so I think if you just take it back to the level of just talking about, you can apply this to all different, this framework or this viewpoint to all different areas of your life, but just taking it into the area of your job as a scientific discoverer, if that's what if you're a researcher at the moment. Just again, this is as you said, this is becoming a theme on this podcast. But for me, you're looking at these, fostering these qualities in yourself: commitment, trust, curiosity, and freedom, to be open to explore what's happening in front of you rather than just assuming and being pathed. And in the context of discovery, that's more just, it's a very important thing. For me, the pivots are curiosity and trust, because what we often see, or what I've often seen in science, is this whole thing about chasing results, about going for a result. You're tamping down the curiosity because you don't trust that the work you're doing is going to take you where you want it to, or where you need to get to the next milestone, the next paper, or the next funding, or whatever. And so you sacrifice curiosity and freedom for what feels like more security in terms of trying to get the result that you need. But if you can just open that up and be aware that although that you would like a specific result to happen, if you can sit back and say, well, be open to another result, and that would just take you on a different path, then that is much more pristine discovery than this kind of trying to force results out.
Right. And this takes us back to episodes 1 and 2 of this podcast. The first episode was talking about the human need of certainty, which may speak to a lot of y'all just automatically, like, yes, I love that. But the second human need was variety. And variety is the place where you get into these unknowns.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You're an explorer, so explore. Don't try and, make the paths before they're actually defined in front of you, even if you think they are. That's
right.
That's the way that I would.
And as you noted a moment ago, Nick, too, this applies in your whole life. And I think back to something that's an example for me. I love sushi, but I'm a white boy from the Midwest. How would I have ever had sushi? Well, I moved to California, and I saw these sushi restaurants around, and of course being, a proud Wisconsin boy, is like, what? Who would eat raw fish? That's crazy. Who would do such a thing? Well, so for years I didn't try it, but I just kept seeing it and thinking, I gotta know. What is it that it's so exciting to people? And I thought, well, I'm gonna go in one time. I'm gonna have a terrible experience. I'm gonna waste some money, and then I'll at least be able to say I know, and I won't care anymore. And I liked it. And then I thought, I want to bring my kids in. And the kids were little, like 5, 6 years old. And I thought, they're going to hate it. My son sat at that sushi counter, and he looked in at those fish and, those things laying in the counter, and he saw the octopus. And it's basically a tentacle with suckers on it. And he's like, I want that. He wasn't afraid to try something new. And I thought, man, if I had that attitude 5 years earlier, I would have been enjoying sushi that much longer. So this applies across the board in your life. Apply it in work for sure, but then spread it out in the rest of your life too. And you'll find it gets easier everywhere once you start implementing this curiosity and freedom in the world.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting when you look at what limitations you place on yourself by just assuming that you can't do this or that you are this or whatever. If you can dissolve that, then you can open some new opportunities for yourself.
That's right.
Okay, yet another interesting and useful way to look at the world, Ken. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
So if you enjoyed the episode today and you want more, you can find more of this stuff on Bitesize Bio at bitesizebio.com/The Happy Scientist, and on Facebook at facebook.com/The Happy Scientist Club. And Ken mentioned earlier the episodes 1 to 2, where we were talking about human needs and so on. If you go back to episodes 1 to 9, in fact, contain a lot of foundational principles that if you haven't listened to them already, it's worth going back and having a listen to those. And if you have listened to them, please let us know what you thought by joining us on Facebook, The Happy Scientist Club, and let us know what you thought. Let us know how you feel that applies to you or doesn't, and any questions that you might have that arise from that as well. So that just leaves me to thank you again for another great episode, Ken. And
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for listening in, and we'll see you again next time.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.